Chapter 33, Oklahoma City, May, June 2001. For 2 days and nights, the Greyhound rolled through the desert lands where the driver called out station stops like names from an old western ballad: Flagstaff, Gullop, Albuquerque. They paused for an hour in Amarillo, then rolled through the Texas Panhandle just as the sun rose into a clear sky. In 5 hours, they'd be in Oklahoma City. Bayasa came along to keep him company because the bus trip was too long for Erica and the baby. They'd fly out in a few days. It was late May, and Mondo was glad to be heading to his mom's home in plenty of time for his mother's June birthday. He'd always been locked up on his own birthday, at least since the age of 12. Most holidays too. Of course, his mom was a Jehovah's Witness, so they never had birthday parties anyway. But this year, Mondo thought it would be nice to give her some roses on her special day, no matter what she said about sin and pagans. Uncle Smokey's wife had given him a ride to the bus and a little cash. He had barely enough to leave Salinas and get Erica a plane ticket on Southwest, but he'd need more money and some fake IDs to start over. This reward was considered standard procedure when anyone did a hit for the cause, but things were moving slow, and Mondo hadn't wanted to wait around Salinas. The morning after the shooting, he still didn't know if Sanchez or Criminal Joe were alive. It took place too late for the papers to report. But whatever happened, Sanchez's nephews would probably be back in Chinatown, pumped up and seeking blood. He made sure to get out early to the tortilla factory to hide guns under the train rails so the crew would be ready. His people there told him the news. Sanchez was dead and Criminal Joe had survived. He took a minute to chat with Chuka, at first making friendly small talk about her son, his friend Night Owl. Then they got to it. She'd heard the CASHAPP video camera was actually working this time, and the cops probably had the whole thing on tape. Mondo listened, but was distracted. He wondered if he left fingerprints on his beer bottle. He looked down and noticed dust from the tracks on his new white running shoes, and he kept trying to rub it off with his hand. While they talked, Chuka's eyes darted off into Mondo's shoes as if they contained some great secret, or perhaps she imagined she saw blood on them. Mondo, Erica, the baby, and Payasa all moved into the small unit attached to his mother's two-story home in Oklahoma City. By night, the neighborhood was a rough part of town that often attracted cops, but by day, it transformed into a pleasant working-class Mexican neighborhood with tall trees, wide streets, and tidy front lawns. His mom's house was old, built something like 1920, but his tiny added-on cottage was a piece of heaven for Mondo and Erica. Mondo's uncle got him a job cutting grass at the college, and it felt as if he and Erica had finally settled into a comfortable life resembling marriage. Erica cooked beans and chicken or other meat for dinner, and when he came home from work, he'd shower and then they'd sit down and eat a meal like a real family. Sometimes they'd walk with the stroller to get ice cream. His younger brother was in YA, but it was nice being around his little sister again, and his mother was thrilled to have her baby grandson there. For the first time since Mondo's son was born, his extended family was together. Mondo was so content he almost forgot why he'd gone there, or that soon he'd have to move on. He often craved just this kind of happiness, but whenever he had it, there was always a part of him that knew he didn't deserve it and knew it wouldn't be allowed to last. His days in Middle America took on a dreamy quality, as if he were looking through a tiny peephole at a life he was allowed to glimpse but never destined to live. Weeks of warm summer afternoons passed easily, and still no money or papers arrived. Suave was acting real strange on the phone. Right after the murder, he'd suddenly come down hard on Boxer and Mondo, telling them the big homie had furiously demanded who took this into his own hands. Suave was terrified of Achali and tried to lay this weird guilt trip on Mondo and Boxer, acting as if Suave and the big homie had never given the green light at all. It didn't make sense. Maybe they were just covering their asses, distancing themselves from a murder in case law enforcement was listening. But Mondo had never seen true carnales behave that way. He wondered if the NF was all it claimed to be. Where was the loyalty? Who had his back now? People pointed fingers instead of taking care of their own. The whole situation left a bad taste. He needed to know what was happening back home. With the cops in possession of that video, they might have figured out he was the shooter. They might have found his prints on the beer bottle. Desperate for news, he called Boxer. He could tell by his voice the guy was using. Mondo asked where his money was. Boxer said he didn't know, but he'd get it Suave. and asked where to send the money when they had it. Mondo said he'd tell him the address later. Not until they needed it. Boxer, as if forgetting what Mondo just said, asked again where Mondo was, and he made some stupid ass comment about Mondo being in McVeigh country, evoking the name of the Oklahoma City bomber to see if Mondo would admit he was there. This annoyed Mondo, and he didn't respond. This was not some game, it was his life. Just get it Suave to send the money, he said. He called Boxer's house the next day, hoping the man might be coherent by then. Boxer's girlfriend answered and told him Boxer was in jail. He was arrested the day before. No way, Mondo said. I just talked to him last night. No, she insisted. He was definitely under arrest already and in jail at the time Mondo said he called. He hung up and tried to figure out why the girl would say such a thing. He couldn't come up with any reason except to conclude she must be lying. But he'd known her since they were kids, and she wasn't like that. The call left another bad taste. He hated not knowing what was happening around him. He never liked feeling out of control, and now he was.